Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Ukraine War breaking news update for the 3rd of September 2024. And this was a breaking news update I was originally going to do before I found out about what happened in Poltava. Now Zelensky, just to let you know, Zelensky has officially announced that more than 180 people have been injured, and 41 are known to be dead at this time. 2 Russian ballistic missiles hit the territory of the Institute of Communication in Poltava. He said 41 are known to be dead at this time. People found themselves under the rubble. Many were saved. More than 180 people were injured. We need air defense systems and missiles in Ukraine, not in stockpiles, to stop this terror. So this has been an absolutely terrible incident in Ukraine, and I'm sure that's going to really hurt their morale. Things are going fairly well in Kursk, difficult in Pokrovsk, but it has been stabilized in Pokrovsk by the sounds of it. Challenging in Vuhledar, but something like this is definitely not going to help the Ukrainians at the moment in terms of their morale, and it's a huge loss in terms of human life and military capability, one would think. Okay. On to what I was going to say before that terrible news, and that was that the US is apparently, according to Reuters, close to agreeing on long-range missiles for Ukraine. Delivery is to take months, is the claim. Okay, let's go through this article because this is, I think, really important. So the US is close to an agreement, they say, to give Ukraine long-range cruise missiles that could reach deep into Russia. I'll come on to that later. But Kiev would need to wait several months as the US works through technical issues ahead of any shipment, according to US officials. The inclusion of the Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missiles, so JASSM, so air-to-surface, firing from planes down at ground targets. The inclusion of the JASSM in a weapons package is expected to be announced this autumn, 3 sources said. The final decision is yet to be made. The sources declined to be named because they're not authorized to discuss the topic. So all this needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. Sending JASSMs to Ukraine could significantly alter the strategic landscape of the conflict by putting more of Russia in range of powerful precision-guided munitions, an important concern of the Biden administration, the officials said. Military analysts have suggested the introductions of JASSMs, which are stealthy and can strike further than most other missiles in Ukraine's current inventory, could push Russian staging areas and supply depots back hundreds of miles. That would severely complicate Russia's ability to sustain its offensive operations and potentially provide Ukraine with a strategic advantage. Launching them from points near Ukraine's northern border with Russia could allow them to hit military installations as far away as the Russian cities of Voronezh and Bryansk in the south. Dropping them near the front lines could enable strikes on airfields and naval facilities in Crimea. Now, of course, all this depends wholly on whether the US allows Western weapons to be shot into Russia. So this is perhaps a moot point. Now, what you might see is that the Biden administration, as it moves across to a Harris administration, if she wins in the election, could see people like Jake Sullivan move aside, and people like, is it Philip Gordon coming in, and others who are, by all accounts, somewhat more hawkish. And you might get a change of approach to strikes inside Russia, and this could be ahead of that. Or if not, then they can be used only inside occupied Ukraine and in places like Crimea. Now, that would still be useful, don't get me wrong. Having a large number of these, I think the Ukrainians are struggling with probably not having many, if any, Storm Shadow missiles left in the inventory. Same with Scalp EGs, similar missiles there. Now, you could, if they were given a large number of these, because US has a huge number of these missiles, then you could see the Kerch Bridge get taken out. You could see many decent targets within occupied Ukraine taken out, and therefore Russia would have to move everything broadly into Russia itself and stage operations much further back. So yeah, stealthy joint air-to-surface standoff missile could enable Ukraine to hit targets about 300 kilometers inside Russia, including at least 30 air bases, some of which Russia has used to launch attacks. Now, I don't know that the US would change so massively to say, right, not only are we going to give you a bunch of cruise missiles, but you can use these to shoot into Russia. But hang on, didn't you just say for the last however long that we can't hit into Russia? Yeah, let's go all in. I don't know that you would expect to see that sort of volt fast, but maybe. JASSM has so far only been integrated into US designed aircraft, so Ukraine will ultimately operate several dozen F-16s, each of which can carry 2 of those cruise missiles. One of the US officials said there were efforts to make the missile operable with non-Western fighter jets in Ukraine's inventory, which is not been reported previously. Although the official did not provide further detail on which jets in the inventory they can be used with, they do operate Soviet MiG-29, Su-24 and Su-27 jets. Politico reported last month that Biden was open to giving Ukraine JASSMs. Ukraine needs far more arms and more powerful weaponry. Its need is growing as it continues to face intense pressure from Russian forces along its eastern front. Older model JASSMs, which were made by Lockheed Martin Corporation, have a range of about 230 miles, 370 kilometers, so they could get those older ones. The missiles, about 14 feet long, 4 meters long, are designed to be somewhat stealthy, making them difficult to spot on radar. They can also fly close to the ground and be programmed to take circuitous routes that avoid air defenses. There is also a longer range JASSM missile that can fly more than 500 miles. Reuters could not immediately establish which of the 2 types Washington was considering, but providing the shorter range missiles would put less strain on its stockpiles, so you're likely to get the older, shorter range missiles. Giving Ukraine JASSMs could also add pressure to Washington to drop restrictions on how Ukraine uses US weaponry, because their effects would be limited if they were not cleared for use on targets inside Russia, said a congressional staffer who works on the issue. In other words, like, if you do give them these, it's kind of pointless to not lift restrictions. Why would you give them missiles that could only be used for far shorter ranged attacks inside Ukraine? US has been reluctant to supply weapons that could target deep inside Russia for fear it would escalate the conflict, but Kiev's allies have been supplying weapons, but with restrictions on how and when they can be used inside Russia, out of concern for that such strikes could prompt retaliations that draw NATO countries into a war or provokes a nuclear conflict. Now, of course, I don't know if that's a kind of misrepresentation of the situation, because I'm not sure that other allies have put those restrictions on Ukraine. Well, Italy has, but UK and France I don't think have, and it's more likely that US is doing that. Each JASSM has a large 1,000-pound warhead, but unlike the Storm Shadow and Scout missiles already provided by Britain and France, it's not explicitly designed to penetrate hardened bunkers. So they had these 2-stage explosive mechanisms where one explosion kind of breaks the concrete outside to have a second part of the broach warhead to go through and hit inside the bunker. So these bunker busters, useful against particular targets. Now, JASSMs aren't designed like that. Newest version costs about $1 million each. GPS system signals and an inertial navigation system provide guidance. When it nears a target, an infrared imaging seeker can help steer it to an impact point with an accuracy of about 3 meters. Although older models might be less resistant to electronic warfare than the current iteration, the infrared seeker would help it find target amid heavy jamming, said George William Herbert of the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. Quote, "They're pretty stealthy, but not completely designed around maximum stealth. A few years ago, a bunch were fired in Syria after chemical weapons incidents, and Russian air systems in the country failed to shoot many down, possibly none of them. I would expect that carefully planned missile flight paths would let JASSM be effective almost anywhere in the war area." So interesting. That could be really good news. It has been on the cards potentially, but of course it's all about the restrictions on their use. It's one thing giving them, the Ukrainians, these missiles. It's another thing saying where they can be used and on what targets and in which country, right? So good, but we'll have to wait to see whether this is great. I think it's great anyway. I mean, to get more ordnance is exactly what Ukraine needs. Like, if you gave them 200 JASSM cruise missiles, that would be amazing, and they could go about hitting loads of targets inside Crimea and Ukraine. Yeah, okay. But that extra level they need to hit inside Russia. Let me know what you guys think. and this was hopefully going to be the good news of the day, but it appears that Poltava has stolen the thunder of this, and that's sad news. But still, really worth getting a little bit excited for the Ukrainians if these do end up getting to Ukraine, certainly before the end of the year. Anyway, take care, guys. Speak soon.